It's a comforting thought, isn't it? That, true harm in the world is really only done by genuinely bad people. But what if that belief, comforting as it is actually, whoa, kind of a dangerous illusion? Welcome to our deep dive into the unsettling psychology of complicity and harm. Our mission today really is to unpack how ordinary folks, people with good intentions, can end up enabling harmful systems. And it's often not about deliberate malice. It's more about this fascinating mix of psychological vulnerabilities, social pressures, and, well, how institutions work.
Exactly. We're drawing a lot today from a really insightful article called How Good People Become Complicit in Harm. And what's so powerful about it is how it just dismantles that easy idea. Evil is done only by evil people. It shows that actually a lot of harm comes from regular individuals acting within systems that kind of normalize it over time.
Right. So, what does this actually mean for you listening right now? And for us, we're going to explore those hidden ways we might maybe inadvertently contribute to harm. And maybe more importantly, how we can start to recognize and resist those paths. Okay, so let's start with that core belief, this widespread idea that most people are, inherently good. And because of that, they're almost immune to causing serious harm. Feels good to believe that, right?
It absolutely does. It's reassuring. But does history or even psychology really back that up? This is where Hannah Arendt's concept, the banality of evil, becomes so important. She observed that these horrific things were often done not by monsters, but by ordinary people who saw themselves as moral. They were just doing their jobs, without any like deliberate evil intent. The really chilling insight there isn't that evil is some extraordinary thing, but that it can be totally mundane, just woven into everyday tasks.
That is a chilling thought. That something so significant can be so ordinary. It really makes you think that harm isn't always these grand evil schemes. It's often much more subtle. And this is where our own psychology gets really interesting, doesn't it?
Exactly. And the article points to some specific psychological traps that nudge us towards being complicit. One is the better than average effect. It's that very human tendency to think we're more ethical, more moral than the average person. While maybe judging others a bit more harshly, it gives us this false sense of security, like, oh, I wouldn't do that.
Oh, yeah, I recognize that one. And you'll really recognize this next one, too. Diffusion of responsibility. This is that classic thing where people excuse themselves, right? Like, oh, that's not my department, or hey, I'm just following orders. It's basically a way to offload your own accountability onto the group or the boss or just the system.
And building right on that is conformity bias. That's our tendency to look around, take cues from confident leaders, or just the crowd, even if our gut is saying something feels off. We sort of override our own judgment because, well, everyone else seems okay with it.
Right. And then there's something called language sanitization. The article gives some really stark examples here. Things like using euphemisms, like optimizing engagement when it actually means something harmful is happening behind the scenes, or cost cutting that ignores the human impact.
Yeah, and what's really insidious about that isn't just that it hides the harm. It actually sort of rewires how we think about it. It makes the unacceptable start to feel normal, even procedural. We become blind to the real cost.
Wow.
So if you connect all these dots,
Yeah.
you see, they're not just little quirks. They're powerful forces working together. They subtly but profoundly shift our whole perception of what's okay. They make bad things feel routine.
And what's really unsettling, I think, is that this kind of harm rarely starts with one big dramatic moral failure. It's often these tiny compromises, right? A series of almost invisible nudges that feels quite insidious.
It really does. Because that's the foot in the door effect in action.
Yeah.
Once you cross a small moral line, maybe you rationalize it, it's just this once, or it's not a big deal, you've created a path. It then becomes psychologically easier to justify crossing bigger lines later. It's like that slippery slope idea. Each step makes the next one feel less significant.
Yeah, the source uses a really strong example, corporate fraud. How it often doesn't start with someone deciding to commit a massive crime. It starts small, maybe fudging a tiny number here, overlooking a small rule there.
Exactly.
And then it just escalates over time as those boundaries gradually wear away.
And what's so striking about that is how these seemingly small things, they aren't just isolated mistakes. They systematically build a kind of psychological pathway. It makes bigger complicity feel less like a sudden fall from grace and more like, well, just the next logical step.
So those small steps are definitely insidious. But then the article kind of flips the script, doesn't it? It points to an even more counterintuitive way people become complicit. Almost shocking, really.
Yes, indeed. Perhaps the most dangerous complicity, surprisingly, happens when people genuinely believe they're doing good. when they think they're defending justice or fighting some kind of evil, that's when the good intentions can become a real blind spot.
Right, which brings us to this concept of moral licensing. That's the idea that, after we do something we perceive as good, something that earns us brownie points in our own moral ledger,
Hmm.
we then feel maybe subconsciously entitled to act unethically later on. Like we've banked enough moral credit to afford a lapse.
Exactly. And the article makes a really profound point here. True believers in harmful systems often end up causing more harm than people who are just cynical opportunists. Why? Because they're convinced of their own righteousness. They're not just doing a job. They believe, truly believe, they're doing the right thing for a just cause. And that raises a really important question for you, for all of us, to think about. When do our good intentions actually become a blind spot? Is it when we get so focused on the goal, the perceived good outcome, that we stop questioning the means?
That's a huge question, and it totally reframes how we think about responsibility, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? I mean, this deep dive keeps pointing back to the idea that harm is often system driven. It's about the structures, the roles, the culture that can make really immoral behavior feel normal or even necessary for the people inside them.
Absolutely. Just think about it. People get subtly molded into being obedient functionaries.
Hmm.
The systems are often set up, maybe not intentionally, but effectively, to diffuse individual responsibility,
Sure.
make it harder to feel personally accountable. It's just easier to see yourself as a small part, a cog, in a much larger machine.
And the article gives some very current examples that really leap out once you start looking through this lens. Tech employees who might see harmful effects from algorithms but keep working on them because, well, it's company policy.
Right.
Or financial advisors selling products they might suspect are harmful but they're on the approved list. Or even bureaucrats just enforcing rules that end up hurting vulnerable people, but they're simply doing their job according to the system.
Hmm. And looking at that big picture, it really underscores something crucial. Just removing one so-called bad apple
Hmm.
often doesn't fix a harmful system. The issue isn't always just one rogue person. It's frequently the actual design, the culture, the incentive structures of the system itself that allow or even encourage people to become complicit.
Okay, so it sounds potentially quite bleak, but thankfully the article doesn't just leave us there. It offers some ways to resist, right? Strategies to build resilience.
Yes, thankfully it does. It offers some really crucial strategies for resistance, for pushing back against these systemic pressures. Firstly, it talks about cultivating strong personal values, values that are independent of, what the crowd thinks or what gets you social approval. It's about having that solid internal compass.
And there's some practical advice too, isn't there? Like practicing taking responsibility in smaller situations, sort of building up that ethical muscle memory so you're better prepared when bigger moral challenges come along, like training for an ethical marathon you said earlier.
Exactly like that.
Mm.
And it's also vital to develop clear moral boundaries ahead of time, like pre-deciding your lines in the sand. For instance, making a clear commitment to yourself. I will never falsify safety data no matter what. Or I will not ignore abuse or harassment in my workplace, regardless of the pressure. Having those clear boundaries acts as a really powerful safeguard when you're under pressure.
That makes sense. And another key strategy mentioned is actively questioning confident voices. Especially when things feel uncertain or if something just doesn't sit right, that kind of healthy skepticism can be a real defense against just blindly going along with the group.
Absolutely. And ultimately, we encourage you, the listener, to consciously take stock of the systems you're a part of, whether that's economic systems, political ones, technological platforms. Think about your role within them and then actively decide, how can I minimize my own potential complicity? How can I act with more integrity within this structure?
So, wrapping this up, this deep dive has really shown us that being good, well, it isn't some fixed state, is it? Like a medal you earn and keep forever. It's more like a practice, something
Yeah.
that requires constant vigilance, constant attention, because without that alertness, really, any of us could slip into moral compromise just by taking the path of least resistance within systems that subtly normalize harm.
That's the core message, I think. True moral responsibility isn't just about intentions. It means staying really alert to how systems are influencing you. It means refusing to hide behind authority or procedures or just doing my job.
Mm.
And it means accepting that sometimes uncomfortable but absolutely essential task of thinking for yourself.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you to take away and maybe mull over. How vigilant are you, really, in recognizing when your own strong beliefs, your own righteous cause, might inadvertently be pushing you towards enabling the very kind of harm you think you oppose?